look, we're closing down the economy. That's tough. It's tough for everyone, tough for small business owners in particular, because, you know, no money coming in, right? But we do believe that the best economic response is actually the health response. You've heard us say that for the last 18 months. I think all the data after the first lockdown proves that. I mean, we had according to the OECD, we had the most open economy in the developed world. And, you know, for a while there, for a long time there, we were almost living in an alternative reality. You know, we were going to sports games, concerts, catching up with mates, going to restaurants, having a couple of beers, where the rest of the world was in some form of lockdown, and a lot of the world still is in some form of lockdown. Having said that, I do acknowledge that level 4, certainly for those business owners in Auckland, or those business owners that rely on products from Auckland, excuse me, has been incredibly tough. I'm just what I'm keen to do, Jason, excuse me, is I'll just go through, spend about a minute or two on the support packages that are out there, but then I'll just talk about what we're doing in the small business space. Are you okay with that, mate? Awesome. So yeah, as hopefully business owners, all business owners know, there are some key support packages that kicked in once we went up the alert levels. Obviously, the first one is the wage subsidy. That's if you get a 40% drop in revenue, and I think the vast majority of businesses will have had that. Easy to prove. That's $600 a week for every full-time employee and $359 a week for every part-time employee. The first tranche of that is closed off. You can now apply for the second tranche of that. So my strong advice is to go hard and get in that, because that's about keeping our workers engaged with the company. Second thing, which is new, is the resurgence payment, business resurgence payment. That's a 30% drop in revenue. That's a one-off payment of $1,500 plus $400 a week per FTE or full-time employee, up to 50 FTEs. Now, that's just a one-off payment. That's just a one-off payment. But, you know, we are giving consideration to further support on that. For those who need it, we have the leave support scheme. That's the same as the wage subsidy, $600 a week per FTE, $359 a week for part-timers. And that's actually there in case you've got an employee who has had to self-isolate or go into quarantine because of COVID. So make sure that people take these opportunities up. Really, really tough. Hey, now let me just talk about some of the stuff we are doing in the small business space, and this is relevant right across the sector. The first one, and it's a major driver, and Vaughan will know this. Vaughan's heard me say this numerous times, and we've talked about this. It is ensuring that every small business owner has the opportunity to embrace digital technologies. And the reason I say that is, I used to say this pre-COVID, but it's even more relevant now, that I think this will be the last generation of business owner that will survive, let alone thrive, without having some form of digital enablement. And the reason I say that is every single thing we are doing in terms of innovation across government involves digital platforms. It's whether it's, you know, you pay your taxes through Inland Revenue's business transformation. It's whether you're engaged in e-invoicing, and I would say within 2 years, you won't be able to invoice or be invoiced by central government unless you're on an e-invoicing platform. To do this, you've got to have a New Zealand business number. There may well be some business owners out there at the moment who have applied for the resurgence payment, and they will know that you've got to have an NZBN to apply and to receive that. But Digital Boost is the series of tools and videos and support that we've put out there to help small business owners go digital. Digitalboost.co.nz. What it is, it's a series of videos. It starts from the very, very basic all the way through to, you know, to the advanced, and everything in between. It's got some key business owners there, some key stakeholders. Stan Walker's on there talking about his experiences. Mills Miliena has, you know, a lot of these guys who have run small businesses are talking about the value of this. And this is everything from, you know, organizing sort of Google, your Google Calendar, like I said, all the way through the more advanced. And that's a series of videos, some short, some longer. You can do them in your own time. And of course, it's all free. So I would just encourage businesses to get into Digital Boost, take a good look, and dive in when you need to. Like I said, completely free, and it's a great resource actually this year's budget, we put forward another $44 million to help businesses go digital. So there's support there as well. It's a really good initiative. A couple of other things we're doing. Government procurement. Now, government procurement fits under my economic development hat. And the thing about the government is we spend $51.5 billion every single year. And if I'm honest with you, we don't know what we're getting for that. There's a lack of transparency and there's a lack of accountability. I'm not talking about the fact that people are being dishonest. Please don't get me wrong. But, in this sort of era of well-being and, Minister Robinson, Finance Minister Grant Robinson and our Prime Minister Jacinda talk about well-being a lot. We don't know if we're getting the outcomes from procurement than we should be getting. And let me give you one example. But this is a hypothetical example, but it might as well be real. If we were to put out a procurement for catering for all of MB across the nation, there are very few companies that could access that. What we're looking to do is chunk things down and say, let's do it region by region, so it gives regional small businesses an opportunity to be part of government contracts where in the past they wouldn't, or they may have subcontracted in at minimal rates. So we're really looking at how we can use procurement to drive engagement with SMEs and Maori businesses right across the sector. We have a target of 5% of contracts are with Maori businesses. My personal view is that isn't particularly aspirational, but we've got to start somewhere. And talking to Renata about this, the thing that I think that you guys do really, really well is there are a lot of businesses out there that have the skills and the competencies and capabilities to do the government work, but it's just a matter of getting on the system and filling in the paperwork and learning how to be part of the system. But so we're really keen to drive that forward. What these sorts of targets have done in Australia is significantly increase the amount of Torres Straits and Aboriginal businesses that are involved in government contracts. But as mentioned, I'm well aware that there are a lot of Maori businesses out there that should be part of government procurement process that aren't, simply because they don't know how to fill in the paperwork. So, we need to upskill in that perspective as well. A couple of other things. Payment terms. So I'd be keen for the feedback from some people on this call actually. So at the moment, there are a variety of payment terms out there. The worst of them is sort of 120 days from end of month of payment, right? That's terrible. You've got others which are 20th of the month following, which is sort of an historical anomaly. There's a lot of what Xero will tell us is that small businesses are paid between 23 and 26 days, which isn't too bad, but we think it should be quicker. What we've said in the state sector is that we want to pay 95% of invoices within 10 working days, and we pretty much hit that. Because if if it's 20th of the month following, the invoice isn't right, it goes back to you. There's another 20 months on that. Can be 20 days, not 20 months. So it can be 50 days before you get paid. We're looking at slowly, progressively saying, okay, maybe we're going to go to 30 days, maybe then 20 days, and then 10 days. And we'll mandate that. Say it's by law, you've got to pay invoices within 10 days. So get that working capital in. We also understand about access to finance. And what a lot of our studies have shown, and research, is that for a lot of companies, accessing finance is really difficult. And you've got to have quite a high appetite for risk. So a lot of the banks are demanding, you put your house up for collateral. So you've got to have a high degree of risk appetite to be able to do that. We're starting with businesses between $3 and $30 million revenue and saying, let's see if we can find a way to lend money at a rate that's unsecured. So that's secured rate, but we won't require any security. So it's easier for companies to borrow money when they want to grow. And we'll start with the 3 to 30 million. We'll see how that goes. And then we'll look to progress that down the revenue scale if we think it's working. But, we understand for a lot of companies, certainly now, if you're looking to grow, access to capital is important. And the cost of capital, if it's unsecured, it can be 15, 16, up to 19%. And it's too expensive. Another thing we're looking at doing is it's called unconscionable trade. And what it relates to is actually unfair contract terms. So, you've got the really big, let's say hypothetically, a really big company that a whole lot of small suppliers and the big company just changes the terms of the contract without any form of negotiation, or if there's unfair terms in that contract, often the small businesses are too scared to, to say anything. But what we're doing is we're doing a whole lot of work around this unconscionable trade, which is ensuring that all conditions in these contracts are actually fair, and the big guys don't get to, walk all over the top of the smaller guys. Two last things I'll mention very briefly. We've got these industry transformation plans going, and I know Renata's a part of one of them. These are areas where we believe as a nation we can have some form of global competitive advantage, or we need to significantly increase productivity. There's 7 of these up and running at the moment. And on the panels, we've got Māori representation, the unions, key stakeholders and officials. And it's a really collaborative project across portfolio. I mean, I sort of have oversight in my role as economic development, but it's cross portfolios and really looking for solutions and around how we can drive productivity and growth right across the economy. The last one I'll mention, and that's climate change. People may be aware there is a lot of work going on in the space at the moment, and it will involve change for a number of businesses over the years. Whilst there are risks with this, there are also, we believe, opportunities for companies to access either new technologies or innovative technologies to in our drive to sort of decarbonise our economy. It's exciting. It's something the Prime Minister is very, very passionate about. And I can tell you one thing as one of her cabinet ministers: if the Prime Minister is passionate about something, then all the ministers are passionate about something. And the last thing I'll mention is the Economic Development Fund. There's a $200 million fund there in regional economic development, and 40 million of that is put aside specifically for Māori regional economic development. On that Māori regional economic development team, there's myself, there's Minister Jackson, there's Kelvin Davis, Minister Davis, Minister Megan Mekawhaitiri, and Minister Nanaia Mahuta. And that's about getting money out to Māori businesses to increase their capability and competency. So the other money doesn't preclude Māori in any way, shape or form, but there is $40 million there that is specifically for Māori regional economic development. And when I say regional economic development, it means not Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. There are other funds for businesses in those areas, but certainly in the regions we think we need to continue investing. On that note, mate, I'll draw breath and happy to have questions.
Oh, kia ora. That's a great summary of what are the waves that are out there that you're kind of trying to navigate, and the waves that Māori should be thinking about as we not just think about COVID, but the next 2 or 3 years. I see Ariana Paul has sort of come in and total with your view that invoicing should be 7 to 10 days. So she's clearly quite supportive of that. And we've had a really good snapshot of, okay, these guys, there's subsidies, there's COVID subsidies. We've got procurement issues, we've got to think about 5%. We've got some access to finance issues that might be coming down the track. And, for these larger businesses, is there an opportunity to actually get loans that are unsecured? We want to have a look at conscionable bargaining, which is massive, and also some productivity issues related to climate change, and think about how we might work with both the Māori community and the tribal community about some of that regional economic development money. So a heap of issues for us to think about, fellas, but clearly some of those things are going to interest some of us, and we're going to open it up. Going to ask Vaughan to start. He's going to have probably a couple of things to say about some of those waves that are coming, and then I'm also going to open the Māori business. We've only got the Minister for another 10-15 minutes, so we're going to make the most of his time. Thank you. Ka pai, Vaughan.
Hey, kia ora, Jace, and welcome aboard, Minister Nash. So, look, I'll try and get this done inside the hour. Look, and I think that one of the things in terms of listening to talk, regardless of there's 70-odd people watching this, and regardless of our political leanings, it's important to understand that, what a government that's in power in the day, what they do, the impact it has that on a small business community. From a planning and strategic perspective, a lot of us haven't got time to pay attention to that, but you cannot ignore the influence on consumer behaviour that a government has, which flows directly through to we, the small businesses. And I think that, you know, the one big thing for me, if I was to choose one thing out in terms of, I believe, Stuart, you are the best small business minister we've had regardless of government. I can't remember the names of any others, and in fact, in terms of current spokespeople, couldn't give you the names, even though I was talking to one last night. But the reality is, you know, getting on to, we are out here at the coalface, you're inside the machine of politics. Going back to the government procurement target of 5% for Māori, that to me is the big genie that's been let out of the bottle. And I don't believe that any small business minister, regardless of government coming in, will be able to look us in the face as a treaty partner without retaining that or improving on it. So I think what we've got to do is acknowledge the fact that you've laid the challenge down, and what our job to do now is the Māori business community is, how do we make that work to prove to government that this was a good decision? And I know that Ariana's out there, Amatai, and, you know, we're really working closely with Amatai to, you know, how do we come to prove to government that we can knock this thing out of the ballpark, because we are that good. So I think that, you know, there's lots of things we can talk about, but that is the one thing that anybody here that's thinking about small business, go through the party websites, look at ACT, look at National, look for, if you're a true treaty partner, using the triggers and levers of government to invite Māori to step up to the plate. That's what's happened there. So kia ora, bro, and that's something that I'd really like to focus on.
There's a couple of questions coming. Obviously, the Regional Economic Development Fund is regional, so you get city people getting a little bit upset about that, particularly the bulk majority of those 1,500 Māori businesses that James was referring to in Auckland, and how we think about that. Response about how you've tried to balance the sort of insatiable appetite of the cities versus the sort of, that ongoing regional kind of voice at the same time.
Jamie, one of the reasons why we've said it is truly regional is because it's a lot harder for some of these regional businesses to take advantage of the opportunities that compared to some of your Auckland businesses. That isn't saying that doing business in the big cities is difficult. It's just saying we want to empower the regions as well. Hey, Vaughan, back to your comment around procurement. You know, I've like I said, I don't think 5% is particularly aspirational in my view, mate. I think there are a significant amount of businesses out there who have the competencies and capabilities, but this is where I see, you know, the role of HTK, and I say congratulations, guys, on getting these forums up and running. But you know, that sometimes it's just filling in the forms, it's navigating the systems of government, and you know, as someone who's, you know, fully enmeshed and embedded within that system, even I know it can be difficult, let alone firms who are trying to do it for the first time. So I would just urge anyone who is struggling with the system to get into it. You know you can do the work. You know you've got the workers with the competencies. Give HTK a call or Regional Business Partner Network a call. Find out how you can be part of this, because I have absolutely no doubt we can get to 10% before too long, mate, because we've got the companies with the skills and the people to do the work. It's just learning the systems. Yeah,
it's a great challenge for us, Minister. So we, you know, we've got to support some of our communities to go and get organised better for that. So Ariana's got her work cut out for herself there, but we will look to see how we can support her too in that. One of the questions that's come in from Andrew is around the construction industry, and they sort of have concerns about how they can get out of Auckland and get materials out. And I know that there's an online facility where you can register and things like that. But how is that tracking internally in terms of whether we're actually getting consents for those kinds of businesses to sort of ship goods in and out, and how are you seeing that?
Yeah, look, in terms of people having to move in and out and businesses moving in and out, that's a pretty seamless process now. Under the first lockdown, it was rather clunky. I'm the first to admit that. And again, as the lead minister for MB, we had a good hard look after the first lockdown, said we've got to do better. When Auckland went into level 3, was it January, February this year, I think, we had really improved the process, so that it's pretty seamless now. It doesn't take long at all. Last I heard, there was about, I think 7,000 or 8,000 workers who've been given dispensation to cross those borders. But in terms of the construction industry, we're having conversations, because we do know that there's a whole lot of construction material which is produced in Auckland, like your pink bats, like your building paper, like your jib board. that is so necessary to continue with construction down the line, right? So we're having these conversations about how we can get these guys operating as an essential business under Alert Level 4, but get them operating safely so the construction industry just doesn't shut down around the country. And we had a meeting 2 days ago. There was Minister Megan Woods, Poto Williams, Grant Robinson. There was the CEO of Fletcher Challenge, and of course Fletcher's manufacturer. I think they do all the pink bats in this country actually, and a lot of the jib board. So it's understanding that, you know, just by closing down Auckland, that has a massive impact upon supply chains throughout the country. So we are looking really hard at how we can get the essential products out of Auckland to the construction sector around the rest of the country. Work is going on in that space.
Minister, there's one of the elephants around the room in terms of the Māori community and bringing together, you know, organisations like Amotai and Potama and some of the Māori business networks and some of the Māori business advisories and working together for a collective proposal on that. What's your view if those organisations came into your office and says, look, this is how we see Māori business over the next 5 years. This is, you know, a plan for trying to work with those communities. What would be your initial reaction to that, where we could somehow achieve that kind of collaboration and that kind of joint proposal from the Māori?
Mate, I would absolutely welcome it. You know, I get delegations of stakeholders through. You know, the chambers are a pretty well networked group. There's no doubt about that, and they're well represented. Regional Business Partner Network, you know, that's reasonably well represented. If you can get a network or an association of Māori businesses, I would absolutely welcome it. And I think that would be really, really powerful. Get that voice, because, you know, people say to me, how many small businesses have you visited? Well, there's 500,000 small businesses up and down the country. Whenever I go into a service organisation or phone up my plumber or go and buy something, I'm dealing with a small business, but you just can't get around them. And it's difficult to get a feel for the voice of small business without talking to their key stakeholder organisations. Like I said, the chambers do it really well. If Māori businesses could get organised, mate, that would be fantastic. It'd be awesome.
The digital enablement component of this government is really a big one. And you have, you know, in the last round there was a targeted focus at Māori business. And the next digital enablement rollout, how are you thinking about the Māori community and that digital rollout, as some people thinking about, particularly the regions and particularly the ongoing some of those rural areas to access, but how are you thinking specifically about Māori digital enablement and rollout in the upcoming 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, well, look, really, really important. As mentioned, I don't think a business owner will be able to certainly thrive. They may survive, but certainly thrive without being digitally enabled. One of the things we're looking at doing is collecting more information about Māori businesses. And let me give you an example. The New Zealand business number, there is now a new field in that where a business can put down whether they're a Māori business or not, which will allow us to better target stuff towards Māori businesses. But for me, it's about using organisations like, you know, HTK to get the message out there to key stakeholder organisations. But what we're doing with the Regional Business Partner Network as well, for example, is we've said we've got to ensure that the networks within Maori business are really, really deep, because we had a little bit of a criticism when we did a big review that it was sort of white middle class, and that's the last thing we need. I mean, you know, I just have a look at the size of the Maori economy; it's massive. So we need to ensure that we are servicing every single business, and it doesn't matter if it's Pacifica, Maori, or Pakiha, or Asian, but we need to ensure that we have the depth of not only business understanding, but cultural understanding. So when people phone in, for example, to the Regional Business Partner Network, then they're getting the response that they need in order to solve their problem and to drive their growth forward. In terms of the digital boost, we're looking at, I think we've actually translated a whole lot of the videos into Te but again, we recognise that we've got to do better engagement with Maori, hence the reason why we want to work with Maori organisations as opposed to telling them this is how things are going to be done. Those days are long gone, I think, mate.
Yeah. Good, last thing is the recent announcement down in the South Island to support tourism around Queenstown, Christchurch, and the Lakes districts and things. All to support down there specifically. It would have come after some time of lobbying by that tourism sector. How are you seeing that in terms of how you then quell, the Aucklands and the Rotoruas, and what's your thinking about where to next? And
yeah, it's a good point.
Is down there.
It's a good point. So the region that has actually suffered the most from a lack of international tourists is actually Auckland, as you can imagine. But what we did is we did an analysis of the regions that have the greatest reliance from terms of a regional GDP on international tourists, and we came up with those 5 regions. And what we said is, sure, if this is going to sound harsh, but you'll know where I'm coming from here. If a tourism business falls over in Auckland, that's really tough. But there are probably jobs that those employees can go to, and it's not going to collapse the Auckland economy. When tourism businesses fall down in Te Anau, Fiordland, Haast, Fox Glacier, Franz Joseph, even Queenstown, then it has a much greater impact on that local regional economy. And so that's why we said, okay, these are the 5 regions where there is a significant reliance on international tourism, hence the reason why we put $100 million of the $200 million recently announced package into there. And that's around mental health and wellbeing packages. It's around advice and then money to implement the advice that's been given. So those businesses can get, don't have to be tourism businesses, any business, or any business that suffered, I think we said 40% loss. They get $5,000 business advice like you get through your regional business partner network, but then you get another $5,000 to implement that advice. We've also put a Kickstart fund in there, which is worth about $40 million. And that says if businesses are hibernating or they're running at a level which is way below where they were pre-COVID, once we open the borders again and start reconnecting with the world, it gives them a grant where they can start, start business again, I suppose, and gearing up for those international tourists that are going to come in. But having said that, we also gave $26 million to our regional tourist organisations or our RTOs all around the country to say, hey, you know what, you guys have done an awesome job at promoting your region to get Kiwis travelling. Domestic spend is 16% higher than it was pre-COVID. I mean, and domestic tourism was worth about 60% pre-COVID. So 16 of 60% is quite high. So, we know we need to get Kiwis travelling. It's a good excuse to see parts of the country you've never seen before. Obviously, you can't go overseas, so make the most of it, go around the country and spend money.
That's helpful. One of the things that's has been another bane for some Māori businesses is that some non-Māori organisations have suddenly become very, very good at describing themselves in Māori ways, but when you sort of look under the hood, there's not a lot there, and in the absence of someone like Te Puni Kōkiri, who actually provides a little bit of oversight about that, and what's your thinking of some of that?
Yeah, that's we're all proud of New Zealand, right? And we love our culture, and we love what we stand for as a nation. But it's a little bit disingenuous to represent yourself as something you're actually not. And I do think, in fact, I know when describing yourself as a Māori business when you're putting it with your New Zealand business number, there is a criteria there. So, I'm not a Maori guy. I couldn't go in, no matter how much I love the culture and everything to do with it, I couldn't go on and say that I'm, that I'm a Maori business. So I get a little cynical when businesses that aren't Maori business start portraying themselves as such. I mean, let me say one thing though, is that I've always been a fan of sort of Maori philosophy in terms of stewardship. And so it's like, what I would say is I'm not a Christian, right? But I think the principles behind Christianity, love your fellow man, don't steal, all this sort of stuff, they're good principles to live your life, as are the Muslim principles and the Hindu principles. In fact, the principles behind most religions are a good way to live your life, and you don't have to be part of that religion to understand those principles. But to represent yourself as something you're not, that's a bit disingenuous in my view.
We've got a few more questions there for you, so I'm going to push it back to Vaughan for another partai.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, kia ora, Jace. Just quickly, in terms of the opposition parties talking about small business and then coming back to the government of the day, I think that one of the things that I've gleaned over the last little while is that we're not interested in what's wrong with the current situation. We want smart ideas and initiatives, no matter where they come from. And I think one of the things that really stands out, if we look at one political party, won't name them, but number 3 in their small business policy is freezing minimum wage for 3 years. And quite frankly, that's just screaming no affinity for the current situation, which is most small businesses can't get staff. So why would you freeze minimum wage for 3 years? Just saying we're a sweatshop. We only want people that want to work for nothing. Another party's come out with, and this is where the point of my question is, relief at the landlord tenant point. A close colleague of mine here in Auckland has 850 tenancies. He's given 80% reductions to a certain group of that tenancy. If you're going to have a mental health problem in small business, it's probably when you lose your home. And the two ways you lose your home is your bank overdraft or your lease that you're signed up to for 9 years, which have personal guarantees. These two areas you touched on the finance side in terms of not having, those deathly clauses. Is there any consideration from the government in around the tenancy-landlord relationship with a view to mental health? The stress is I'm sitting in my home, my family, my kids are here, and we could be renting in 3 months. That part.
Yeah, look, it's a really good point. And as a Minister for Small Business last time, I did a lot of work around this. I didn't quite get the policy across the line that I'd hoped to. But one thing I would say is a lot of people don't realise that, and I may get the clause wrong here because it's been about a year since I looked at this, but I think it's clause 26 in the standard leasing agreement. So after the Christchurch earthquake, a new clause was installed in your current leasing agreement, which basically says if you can't operate, then you've got to come to a deal with your landlord. Lease agreements that are pre-Christchurch earthquake or the old lease agreements don't have that clause in them. And so that's where you're reliant on the goodwill of your landlord. And I know there are some who are absolutely fantastic. And then there are others. I know there was a big Australian property group that just said to every Kiwi business, we don't care. If you can't pay your rent, then off you go. And I thought that was terrible. Whereas a lot of Kiwi ones, and I think I know the company you're talking about, Vaughan, said, we understand where you're at. I think Robert Jones did the same. Robert Jones, or Bob Jones's company, they got a lot of tenancies. They said to all their tenants, it's all good. We're gonna back you on this. You've been with us, so we'll be with you. Really good examples of people that did this. But I would say to any small business, check your lease agreement, and I think it is clause 26, but I can get back to you for you to get the information out there if you want, Vaughan and Jason. But I think it is a new clause 26 that says you have to come to some sort of deal with your landlord if you can't access the premises for the purpose of doing business.
Kia ora for that, Stuart. I think that if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to hook you up with Danny Friedlander, in terms of his 850 retail properties in Auckland and how he defined who was worth. Because look, some businesses are going to go anywhere, so you've got to be, realistic about that. But in terms of kicking on from there, in terms of the stress that a lot of people are going through at the moment, where they don't see the way they're going to get through this from a Maori mental health perspective, I think that one of the aspects that we're feeling coming through from the daily hui that we're getting, that tension is building up, and I think that a healthy way for the small business minister is to actually acknowledge that most of us were nut jobs before we got into business, but then you add a pandemic to that, and that just amplifies the whole situation, right? And it's so I think that that's something we're really keen to talk to you about, because it's something that I've noticed. This what's different this time around. It's that some people just aren't coping.
What I'll do, Vaughan, sorry, Pete, what I'll do, Vaughan, is I'll talk to the new Minister of Justice. It's a new one this time compared to last time. I'll put forward the proposal I had around this, which was pretty innovative, but I think provided a solution. But again, this mental health thing is a really, really big one, as I mentioned before, it's stressful enough running a small business without having to run it in the middle of a pandemic and a lockdown. So I just urge anyone, if you've got mental health problems, or no, if you're feeling depressed, if you feel as if things are getting on top of you, then for goodness sake, reach out. We have this macho Kiwi thing of bottling everything up inside and saying, I'm okay, mate, I'll have another beer. That does not work. Talk to your mates, phone 1737, seek out advice, and that's actually what real men do. And it's not just men but women, but seek out, recognize you need that support, and it's there for you for good. It really, really is.
The question, Sue, was tax relief. Were you seeing any tax relief in the future?
Yeah, no. Actually, that's something I was going to mention. If people have tax obligations and they are really fearful that they can't meet those tax obligations, please call Inland Revenue, and they have been given permission through, well, Cabinet has given the Commissioner power to waive any penalties and interests if people have an arrangement with Inland Revenue to meet their obligations. So one thing that I would say is, please do not bury your head in the sand with regards to your tax obligations, because if you do, and it does start incurring penalties and interest, that just blows out, and that really does cause mental health and stress. Vaughan, when the Inland Revenue is chasing you, they will allow you to delay your payments, or they will allow you to put a schedule in place to meet your obligations. But please, if I just beg you, give them a call first. Let them know your situation. They will be very, very receptive to that, and they will allow you and work with you to come up with a way to meet your obligations. But don't bury your head in the sand. That's when it becomes, that's when it really blows out. I was their minister for 3 years in the last term, and we worked really hard to change that culture from one of, we're going to come after you, to one of, how can we help you? And I think, certainly with the first lockdown and this one, they really are there to help you. So please don't be afraid to pick up the phone and give them a call.
What would you? Some people are obviously sort of chipping on the landlords, and you get an example of the Freelanders with a really large landlords, and then you sort of drill down onto some of the smaller business owners that are, probably now living week to week and now thinking about exiting. There's been a bit in the news about trying to tidy up some of the rules around what is possible and what's not. Clearly, that's going to take a while. And so, how are you thinking about this issue now, in terms of clearly a lot of tenants are probably now on the out. We're going to sort of jam up the tenancy tribunal and every other tribunal as they try and work out how to get monies back.
Yeah, it's a really vexed issue, Jason. I acknowledge that, and Vaughan, I acknowledge your point that this can cause a huge amount of stress, right? Because you've still got these fixed costs, you've got no revenue coming in. If you've got any savings at all, and a lot of businesses don't, then you're seeing those really, really quickly eroded. Again, let me talk to the new Minister of Justice. Do check your contract. But what I think we absolutely need to do in the post-COVID world is insert this clause in to every leasing arrangement. And even if I don't know if we can do it retrospectively, but it is unfair when someone can't access their building to do work and yet they're paying rent. But I will also acknowledge that the Friedlanders and the Bob Jones of this world have done the right thing. But in a lot of areas, and certainly in a lot of our regional areas, a lot of our landlords are your ma and pa investors as well, and this is their retirement gig. They've bought a small commercial building, and they've got a mortgage to the bank. So it's not quite the big bad landlord and the small poor tenant, even though I do acknowledge a lot of the situations that certainly I've heard as a small business owner is the big bad landlord who just seems to be taking advantage of a vulnerable business. But sometimes there are two sides to every story. But let's see what we can do going forward, and I'm happy to engage in dialogue on this.
Yeah, Kia ora, Minister. Hey, you talked about business advisory and implementation grants that were available to the South Island. The data that we've seen through our surveys and polling, which was quite surprising, is that only a small number of Māori businesses required business advisory, but around 30% actually wanted business implementation support. Do you think that would be because it's in the South Island only for those regions affected by tourism? Do you think that initiative will go to the likes of Auckland, which have been really smashed by COVID, and other regions?
Yeah, look, it's worth considering. I certainly won't make any promises, but there is one thing about giving advice, right? And that's all very well, going to an expert and getting advice. And if the advice is, okay, if you do this, it's going to solve your problem, but it's going to cost you $5,000, and you haven't got a spare $5,000, and that advice, it'll sit on the bottom shelf and it won't make any difference to your business. So we do have to find a way where we can sort of operationalize that advice without putting too much of an impost on the small business owner. And when I talked about access to finance, and I talked about, admittedly, the 3 to 30 million revenue companies, but if that works, we'll sort of chunk it down. But what I'm also keen to do is take a look at the experience of these of the South Island businesses and see if it does make a noticeable difference. And if it does, it's certainly something that I'd be keen to go to my cabinet colleagues and say, hey, look, if we put an equal amount of money in, or even a 50%, right, contribution in, to helping businesses operationalize the advice that they're getting, and that this makes a really big difference, then like I said, that's something that I would be more than willing to explore and take to my cabinet colleagues.
I was meeting with someone on an online meeting with someone in the last few days from the regional business partners here in Christchurch, and he was telling me that there's no funding now until January. First of all, is that correct? And if it is there a way to speed it up? Because there's a lot of businesses, well, I'm referring to Christchurch, but I'm sure all around the country, who need help right now to get, for a whole lot of reasons. But the thing I'm dealing with is people wanting websites and setting up online shopping and things like that.
Look, I haven't been told that, and I was speaking to Leanne Watson, who's head of your chamber down there 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. There is still funding in the Regional Business Partner Network. One thing that they might have been talking about is we put about $55 million into the Regional Business Partner Network after the first lockdown. And how the Regional Business Partner Network works is it's 50% funding from government, 50% skin in the game from the business who's seeking the advice. The $55 million, that was, okay, we will give you advice for free. You don't have to put any skin in the game, because we recognize that when businesses were basically shut down for intents and purposes, they didn't have a spare 50% to whack in. That money has gone, but the Regional Business Partner, business as usual, is now back up and running. And it's my understanding is that there is still money in that RBP pot.
Okay, I'll get back on to the guys talking
but please check that. If you, I might give Leanne a call and Leanne Watson and just check that that's the case. But that's my very clear understanding, and I sought this assurance from officials about it'd be 2 or 3 weeks ago now. So I'm assuming that's still the case. But if you hear something different, please get in touch.
Minister, I'd be happy to answer that from the Auckland perspective. The funding is still available for management capability training, which is giving the training to the business. The advisory funding has all been completed.
That's the 100% advisory funding?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And the amount of management capability funding in different areas has become quite a bit, is getting to the end.
Thanks, Jane. I'll take a look at that and I'll see where we need to go, because I think it's a really valuable service, and I would hate to see it run out of money and businesses, well, not fail, but businesses not able to access the sort of advice necessary. So I will take a look at that with my officials and see where that money is at the moment. But thanks for that feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Thanks, Danny. Thanks for chipping in on the state of the nation down there in regional funding. We've also got Fiona, who is still here, if she's still here, to put her question in. If not, we've only got a few more minutes, so we're going to make the most of the time, Stuart. And I think when you sort of fast forward 2 years and for whatever reason you don't are able to get back in for that third term, where do you want to leave the Māori economy and Māori business community? What are the things that you would like to see us on the street and look us in the eye and go, hey, we did that? What would be your greatest aspiration there over the next couple of years to achieve?
Oh, look, I think there's a lot of businesses doing a hell of a lot of work at the moment that haven't been able to access, as mentioned, some of the government procurement contracts that they have the ability to take hold of and run with. I'd love to see, I talked about 5%. I'd love to see it at 10%. And I don't think there's any reason why it can't be 10++, if I'm honest. Digitization, I would love to see every Māori business engaged in digital tools which will allow them to better grow their own business, but also become a lot more efficient and engage in, just become a lot more efficient. The thing is that I will say, Jason, is when I talked to Craig Hudson again from Xero, he said, I don't know how many customers they've got. Let's say they got 250,000 customers. Every single business generates a whole lot of data that very few businesses actually use to make good business decisions, or use it when they're making business decisions. I would love to see Māori businesses leading the way right across the sector in terms of government procurement, in terms of digital enablement, in terms of growth, in terms of productivity. The Productivity Commission actually did a report on frontier firms, and it was one big chapter in that about Māori businesses. And there is a common view, I think, across government that there are some businesses that are operating at their potential, but there's a whole lot more that, with a little bit of incentive and a little bit of help from guys like you, Ren, could really, really fly. So I would love to see that happen, and the share of business driven by Māori business just
Wonderful.
Go through the roof.
Wonderful vision there, Minister, and probably a good segue to sort of leave it for Ariana for the last question, particularly on the procurement. So we'll ask Ariana to give her partai if she's there. Kia ora, Ariana.
Kia ora, Jason, and thank you, Minister Nash, for your time this afternoon. Ariana from Amotai, and really great to hear you talking about the government's procurement targets. Just a couple of, I guess, observations around the target. 5% number of contracts, you're absolutely right, should be changed to value, so 100% behind you on that. I think that the processes for whānau to engage in the government's procurement processes, I understand they're under review, and Lawrence Pidcock's doing a really good job of this. But certainly, if you were to ask many of our businesses who are here today, do you go on to GETS, or are you on the all of government panels? A lot of them would be saying no. And so even reviewing the system at its the highest hierarchical way of being able to engage with government, I think really does deserve a huge, massive smashing, and I know Lawrence is up for that, so that's really, really good to hear. But the other thing that I just wanted to sort of say is that, yep, while we know we've got great Māori businesses who are up for the challenge, there has been an underinvestment, I feel, in the capability and development of Māori businesses. So we've been dealing a lot in private sector. There are huge differences between the two sectors, working in public and private sector. So for us to be able to scale to the capability and to meet the expectations of government requires some investment. And so in particular around health and safety, for a lot of these big contracts that we, where there is a lot to gain from, and many of our businesses are in the construction space, construction civils. But there needs to be, following this policy, there needs to be an investment behind Māori businesses to be actually able to achieve. So just wanted to lay that, and thank you, Jace.
Thanks, Ariana. And one thing I would say is, Jason, you talked about the fact if there was a Māori Business Association or some peak body, that would be hugely valuable, because the last thing we want to do, and sometimes what we get accused of, is sitting in our ivory towers, developing policies, putting them out there and wondering why they don't resonate. If policies are going to work, they've got to be done in collaboration and cooperation and partnership. And I think you'll find that this government is really, really open to that sort of approach. So, Ariana, you're dead right. We do need policies around enablement. Lawrence is doing a fantastic job. I'm so pleased that he's leading the procurement revision and review. But let's keep working together, because that's the only way we're going to be able to drive the change that we know is so necessary.
Well, kia ora, Minister. I know there are others here that also want to ask a question, but we're appreciative of your time, and it's a good way to sort of finish it off. We've enjoyed your vision at the end about what you'd like to see when you do see that Māori business walking down the street in 2 years' time, and what you'd like to achieve with procurement. So it was timely that we got Ariana to sort of round that off. So thank you for that. We appreciate that we can only catch so many balls at the same time. And so thank you for outlining the long list of what's really occurring in the Māori economy and how we do our part, but also try and stretch a dollar to go a bit further in times like this. On behalf of Ngā Pakihi Māori, o te motu, mai tika māwi tātuki te wai paunamu, nā manaaki tangi ki a koe te rangatira me tō tainga mai. Nō reira, kia ora e hoa. Thank you on behalf of us all.
Kia kaha.
Kia ora, mate.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora.